All right. Welcome to the Plone Podcast, episode 2. And as you can see, I'm still in orbit, but there will be no force chokes this time. You can relax. I am with Érico Andrei, who's been a long-time Plone contributor, Plone community leader, instigator of the Plone Conference 2013 with Brazil, among many other things. And so we're going to talk about all things Plone, plus some more.
Really? We did not agree for the some more, but yeah, let's do it.
So I've known you for a long time. I met you for the first time in person in Bristol in 2014. And I believe actually that would have been at the Plone board dinner, which is a tradition that the foundation has at every Plone conference. The current and past board members get together for a dinner. And I think it's the one thing that we actually spend money on, aside from servers and marketing and sprint support and things like that. So it's the
Lawyers.
one. Yes, that's right. The lawyers. Never forget the lawyers. And it was at that dinner that evening that I first met you. And we got to hang out for the first time, even though I'd heard about you and seen you all over the place in Plone News. And at the same time, you were organizing the conference in 2013 in Brazil. I had been organizing a symposium in Oshkosh a few months before that. And so I was always jealous that I could not get to the conference in Brazil. And I think that was a pretty big one. That was probably 400 people in attendance or something like that.
Yeah, or more. Up to this day, I have no idea about the final numbers. Mostly because I'm lazy and I really don't want to get back and look at all the numbers. But it was a really big conference.
I think you held it at the same time as you organized the Python Brazil. Is it like a PyCon, right?
Exactly. It's the largest Python conference in the Southern Hemisphere, for sure. And I was the organizer of 2011. And 2012 was in Rio, amazing conference. And for 2013, we decided to join efforts with the Plone conference, mostly because Brazil is a bit different from other countries where actually the Python community was incubated as part of the Plone and Zope communities. Most of the places there was already an early divide, but in Brazil we had this concept of PZP, Python, Zope, and Plone. And so almost all the other Python Brazil conferences were Plone and Zope heavy and were organized by Plone and Zope people from Brazil. So 2013 was the last one because then everybody moved away. Most of us are expats now, so
That's right. That's right.
yeah.
And I remember when you moved to Berlin. What year was that? Was that 5 years ago?
Yeah, 2015.
Yeah. And I remember you started. I noticed I was paying attention who you were hiring, and I was like, oh, he's picked off that Brazilian, that Brazilian, that Brazilian.
Actually, before that, I was trying to help people to move around because Brazil is like this big island. I always invite my friends from Cordoba in Argentina, like Franco, Roberto Allende, Manuel Sartor, because these guys were in touch with the greater Plone community and also with the other places in Latin America. And we Brazilians were mostly isolated, speaking our own language, that strange version of Portuguese, and not being part of the community and so on and so forth. And one of the things I promised myself was to try to break this And the moment I was able to, I basically moved here. I had a really good position. I helped other Brazilians to kind of break free of the gravity well of the country and to explore new things and get in touch with new cultures and new work environments and so on.
I know you've said some really great things about Berlin, and it's, I guess now you can say safely it's officially your home. But is
Yes,
there what exactly are the things that drew you to Berlin in particular?
that's a really good question, and that's interesting because I first of all I'm kind of old. You see, gray hair, and I still remember the good old days of the Cold War and the evil empire and good empire and stuff like that. So I grew up in Brazil, and we had this public television network, and they were really good at broadcasting art movies or European movies, and I'm really addicted to movies. And I remember the first time I saw Berlin was in Fassbinder's Berlin Alexanderplatz.
Ah,
That's a 14-hour movie. In Brazil, they would broadcast like in over 2 weeks, every night, 1 hour, 20 minutes, and so on. So I got like excited with the city, especially because it was this movie is a really good one. There's a new version now out, but it's interesting to see how was Berlin before the Second World War, right? Then later on, I my favorite movie director is Wim Wenders,
mm,
and he directed two masterpieces about Berlin. It's Wings of Desire and Far Away So Close. So I always wanted to come here, and most of my the musicians in the late 70s, beginning of 80s were in here somehow. So you had Bowie, you had Iggy Pop, you have of course the Germans like Alphaville and so on. So it was like a place that drew me. I always wanted to come here, and since I first visited the city, I was in love, and I said, okay, at some point I'm going to live there. And then I found a job that would bring me here. So that
wow,
was the point.
that's great. I think the my awareness of Wim Wenders probably started because of the U2 album. I think in 1991. Is that right?
Yep, that's a really good reference. Actually, it's interesting because if you see the video clip for "Stay Far Away So Close," it's basically a montage of scenes from the Far Away So Close, and also some like a video story about this girl and her band trying to make out and break and get famous and so on. They're singing, and I believe 2 years ago I went to a concert of that girl.
Ah,
She's actually a musician, a really good one, and also an actress. And I went to her concert mostly because she was the girl from the from the video clip.
wow,
So
that's very cool.
yeah, it's all things get connected.
Yeah, my impression of Berlin, especially back in those days, boy, I sound old too, is that it was like the New York City from the 70s. You know, the underground music scene, the art scene, and I guess it was a very inexpensive place after the fall of the wall. For a long time, I think people were able to go there and just live a very bohemian life, and I think that's probably changing now.
Yes, it is. The city is getting gentrified. It's kind of I would say like San Francisco in the first internet bubble, or maybe beginning of second. So I live in the east side of Berlin, and I live 2 blocks from the main anarchist neighborhood. So I was walking there today, and you see the old buildings, the occupations, the squatters there with their flags and stop gentrification. And on the other side of the street, and a brand new building, clearly gentrified, with lots of international surnames in there, and all graffitis all over, like "Oh, stop gentrification," or "Down with this regime in this random country." And you put the country here, put the country name there, so it's there. So there's still a little bit, not much, but, and of course I know I'm part of the problem, even though it's
I was
like
thinking that.
yeah, that's the whole point, right? I am part of this gentrification process. It sucks to admit, but yeah.
So I was laughing because I was receiving, I was actually just receiving some messages from Hector about the political situation here in the U.S. and like, stop, Hector.
You know he's going to watch this, right?
I hope so.
And Hector is still no problems with the basura espacial. Sorry about that. That's
Yeah.
a running joke.
Okay. Yes. Well, yeah. Actually, I was telling. I think it was Andrea Cecchi this morning about when Franco Pellegrini came to the 2011 conference in San Francisco to the
Yeah.
first. I think it was the Plone Master class that Martin Espelli gave, and I was attending that with a colleague from University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. And I think partway through the morning, Franco Pellegrini arrived disheveled, exhausted, kind of smelling a little bit, and complained that it had taken him 33 hours to get to the conference from Cordoba in Argentina. And at the time, I hadn't realized that every time Franco travels anywhere, it always takes him 33 hours to get there. So when he came to the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh here for the symposium that we held, he also said, "It took me 33 hours to get here." It's always.
No, it's insane when you consider, like, I was I always had the luck of living in São Paulo. São Paulo is basically one of the hubs of air travel in South America. So I had easy flights to most places. But from time to time, I would see Franco doing like Cordoba, Buenos Aires, São Paulo, somewhere else, somewhere else. It's kind of, what the fuck?
It must be a beautiful place that he lives, because otherwise I can imagine someone would be tempted to maybe change locations just to make it a little easier. But
I love Cordoba. Personally, I love Cordoba. There was a long time in the past I was considering moving there. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful city. It's a beautiful, like, province. You have the lakes nearby. You can travel, and also I would say any city that has this neighborhood with computer science names on the streets, it's worth living.
wow.
Yes, yes. Remember driving around the city and kind of, wait a second, this
What
is
are
a
some of the
really good
names?
name. I saw Blaise Pascal, I saw Ada Lovelace, and so on and so forth. It's impressive.
Right now I'm going to want to find out more. And if we can travel again, I wish I could get down there. I need an excuse to get down there.
Yeah, whereas Roberto Allende now lives in New Zealand. That's going to be hard, because that's interesting. I wanted to go to Cordoba again, and I kind of twisted Roberto's Allende's arm to organize a Plone symposium there. And so in 2000, we organized the first one in 2009 in Brazil, in São Paulo. We invited Limi.
Mm.
Limi had this joke in one of his slides somewhere, basically saying he wanted to see symposiums in more places. And then we organized the one in São Paulo. And then he added a slide saying, oh, I want to see a symposium in the South Pacific Islands now. And that was the running joke for a while. I tried to convince someone from Australia to help us, but didn't work. But then we had the symposium in 2009 in Sao Paulo, 2010 in Cordoba with Steve McMahon, 2011 again in Sao Paulo. That's actually when Franco gave his talk that we uploaded and people saw, and then drove the fundraising to get him to the conference.
Okay.
And then we had 2012 in Brasilia, 2013 in Rosario in Argentina, and then it stopped.
So it's kind of your fault that we got the Plone IDE made so public. This is the tool that Franco created that let you edit a running Plone site from within the Plone site, like actually change the code of the Plone site. It's like mind blowing.
It was insane. When I saw that, I was mind blown as well. Kind of, fuck, man, this is awesome. It was an insane conference. I had the opportunity to drive Alan Runyon and Jim Fulton around São Paulo to go to dinners and so on and so forth. And it was like being an Uber driver, but driving like your idols. And they would start talking about bad decisions and why, oh, if I had a time machine, I would change that and not use that and so on and so forth. And I was like, fuck, this is amazing.
That's cool. Man, that's really cool.
It was really cool.
So I'm thinking about some of the stuff that you've done since. You've been on the board since, you've been on the Plone Foundation board since, is it 2008?
No, 11.
When you first started?
I was elected in San Francisco the first time. And then I was 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14. And then I stopped for a while and I came back. Now I'm trying to remember if it was Barcelona or I believe San Francisco. No, San Francisco, Tokyo.
Tokyo, right.
So, yeah, 18, 19, 19, 20.
Yeah, because 2014, that dinner was the first dinner I was joining the board. And it was it was really cool to get a chance to meet somebody who, well, had done so much and then was supportive and had really good words of wisdom, which is something that is still true today. You're still a very wise person.
No, actually, I surround myself with smarter people. That's how I sound wise from time to time. I listen to people saying the obvious things.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to do, to allow other people around you to take charge of things that you might not think of, or to come up with ideas that you might not have. And I was going to joke, I mean, for me to surround myself with smarter people is really easy.
Come on, man. Don't sell yourself too short. You're one of the good ones.
So one of the things I'm always interested in when I'm going through this really many years long podcast series is I want to find out more about the background that a person had. Like, what drew you to computers or software? Like, what was your childhood growing up? Did you play with computers when you were growing up? How did you start being interested in programming?
So I saw computers like back in 1984 or 5. I took my first computer lessons, programming lessons back in '85. I was 9 to 10. I learned how to code in BASIC, and then 1 or 2 years later, I learned COBOL, the base, and C.
Wow.
And of course, after learning COBOL and C, I decided to go back and just play sports for a while. Yeah, but I was fascinated with computers, and not I was always bad at gaming, but I was always in love with the idea of creating stuff. And when I was young, football,
Hmm.
the yeah kicker. So in Brazil we have something similar to that. It's not the same thing. Of course, we have a football there, but my first real program was a scoreboard for one of these things. So I could invite my friends over, so we would play, and I would have like this computer with the score, and it was like, oh my god, that's so awesome.
What was the computer that you used?
I use MSX. It's a Japanese standard. It's not well known in the US, but it was really big in Brazil and parts of Europe, Netherlands, Spain, and of course Japan. It was the thing before the like the gaming thing before even NES came around. And some older versions of MSX were used to develop games for Master System and Mega Drive. It was like the computer system they used to code things. Uh, so for me, going to Tokyo was like a childhood dream because I always wanted to go there and see the old MSX in the wild, and it was impressive.
Did you actually
Up to
see that
this, oh
in
yeah,
when you? Oh,
yeah. I went to the Super Potato that's there for store building, yeah, and Matthew Wilkin also went there and so on.
huh.
Actually, the day I went there, I bumped into Paul in the middle of Akihabara. I was joking that I was probably in the biggest city in the world, right? And I bump into a Plone person crossing the street. So that's how Plone is cool. And I went there, of course, and I was tempted to buy one computer, but I had no space in my luggage.
Oh,
So
that's too
it's like,
bad.
oh fuck, yeah, it was. I'm planning to go back there at some point, and
I want to go back to. I was going to say, so Paul and I went shopping a couple of times because he was looking for, he loves these little laptops that you can't
yes,
find. They're like super small laptop, only the Japanese make them. And so we went shopping a couple of times to look at different stores that had these things. And the last one we visited together, I told him just buy it because you keep spending all this time going from store to store. I mean, just buy it. What's the next time you're going to be in Tokyo for? And he just wouldn't do it. It was so sad.
no, it was interesting because in the end I was there and I have all these Japanese anime because one thing São Paulo in Brazil has this huge Japanese influence.
Say, yeah.
So I grew up with friends that were like son and grandsons of Japanese immigrants, and for me it was okay. It's like coming to the source,
Mm.
and I love animes growing up. I had this Yamato that Star Blazers in the US that was this huge spaceship that was in the it was built from the carcass of the Yamato battleship from the Second World War.
Okay.
And now I went to Tokyo thinking, okay, I'm going to buy a MSX, an old MSX, and something related to Yamato, right? And in the end, the only thing I bought was like this size miniature of Yamato.
Oh.
That cost me a lot, but I'm happy.
Did you find a bigger model though? And you chose
Yes,
not to get it? So how big was it?
same like this size.
Mm.
It's the whole problem was the same. No space left on my luggage. So
Oh man, I bought so that particular evening when I was with Paul, I ended up buying just a couple of Ultraman figurines because
oh,
I grew up
Ultraman.
watching Ultraman. Yeah,
Me too. Ultraman, Spectraman, Ultra 7, and all the cool kids. Oh, Tokyo.
and
Actually, Manabo, if you're watching this, or actually when you're watching this, what about a symposium in Tokyo when we can travel again?
yes,
Or
yes,
whatever, like a PyCon Japan. Invite us. We will be there.
that's true. I really would like to go back. There's the home of judo is a place I visited, the Kodokan, and I took the afternoon off when I guess I wasn't. There was the second day of the training days. We weren't teaching anything, so I just took a little bit of time to go down to find the Kodokan, and I found out that you can take classes there, and so I've been asking my son if he'd like to go, and he would. So we'd like to go back and take a week long class at the home of judo. Ooh, that'd be really cool. But then, of course, we want to spend time doing Plone stuff too.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, for that, I need to
Like,
bring my younger son because he's interested in programming. So I got we'll have to organize a family trip.
see, Manabo, it's your call now.
That's right. There's a lot riding on this now. That was a fantastic conference too. The space that we had was fabulous. Um,
Yeah, it was really good. I love the conference. Personally, I love the color of this t-shirt. I'm always like, okay, whatever color, but it needs to be black. And then all of a sudden, I'm wearing this all the time because, oh, that's cool. And actually, wearing this in Tokyo's subway was like the best thing ever.
stand up a little bit so we can see the symbol because I think that's a really smart design because that symbol on I guess my left is the symbol for Tokyo except modified a little bit with the Plone logo inside.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
It was a great conference. It was. I was so grateful to Manabo for organizing it. It's amazing.
And it's reminding me the sprints in Tokyo were organized in the Microsoft building. That was a beautiful building. I think we were on the 17th floor or 23rd floor. I can't remember.
Yeah,
Looking down over Tokyo. It was just beautiful. The corner office let us see Tokyo in so many different, such a wide angle. And and then that's actually reminding me that the Plone conference in Boston was held in a Microsoft building too, on the just off the MIT campus at the Microsoft New England Research and Development Center, which Microsoft was really gracious to give us access to the space for pretty much the entire week. And that's reminding me that you used to work for Microsoft.
exactly. I started my career at Microsoft actually. I started doing the low level thing that's answering support calls. It's the greatest school I could ever had in terms of debugging stuff. It was amazing because it was like a outsourced company, and the company did not have lots of money, so my computer could not run Internet Explorer, but I was the one supposed to give support for Internet Explorer. So I would give support by heart, remembering like, oh, now you need to click in here and there and so on and so forth. And you have no idea how many people called back in the day saying, hello, I'm a lawyer. And I'm going to sue Bill Gates because this is not working. Man, whatever. I'm paid minimum wage. Fuck you. Of course, I never said fuck you out loud, or at
Mhm.
least they never heard. But
I can't imagine that most call centers would really want their support people saying,
oh yeah, and then from there I went to a marketing position to be a leading evangelist in Brazil for the server products. When Microsoft was like fighting an uphill battle against Novell,
uh,
it was really fun because I had to learn a lot about how to sell your product that's clearly inferior to the competition without being an asshole.
did it work?
Oh, it did. Actually, it did. I was able to. In some cases, it was easy sell of selling Windows NT against intranetwork, mostly because I had the selling point of, okay, you see, if you're only worried about file server and putting files somewhere and allowing people to print stuff, yeah, that's it. Intranet solves your problem. But if you need to run an application, man, it's Windows. Because you can write things in Visual Basic. Think about that.
Mhm.
And it runs on the server. And of course, it was exactly at the moment that corporate networks were moving from IPX to TCP/IP, and there was one of the early versions of intranetwork did not have a decent DHCP. So imagine setting up 200 and something computers by hand, IP and NetMask and so on and so forth. So that was kind of easy. Trying to sell SQL Server against Oracle was like, it was insane. It
What
was
year was that?
1998.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Well,
I
I think
still
Microsoft SQL Server was pretty good software because that I remember they purchased the source code off Sybase, and I remember
actually
Sybase
the
was
7, the SQL 7 was a good one. The 6 was not that good. Most of the time, my selling point was Oracle is better. Everyone knows this, but Oracle is better in things you do not need. Maybe like a big oil company or a big retail, but not your company, man. So you're just paying for the development they did for this oil company like Exxon and so on. You do not need this. You can go
well.
with a smaller
I,
database.
I'm gonna check my wallet now because I'm worried that my wallet's going. What the heck?
Oh, sign a check now. It was good. I learned a lot in there, and and the interesting part was the fact that I hated Microsoft with my guts when I went there. I was a Linux user since '93. I use Slackware and so on from thanks to my college years and so on. And the MSX standard means Microsoft extended. So Microsoft developed this standard with some Japanese company called ASCII. And then Microsoft basically said, oh, fuck you, I'm going to do other stuff. So I hated them for that.
Ah, that's why. Okay, because around that time period, I remember really not liking Microsoft because of the things it was doing to Netscape and some of the other things they were using their monopoly position to crush competition or to prevent competition.
I was there. I remember that. And I used Netscape. No, but actually, Netscape lost to themselves. My personal opinion was that Netscape, the moment they went and they did their IPO, they start playing a game they were not prepared to do. That's when you have external shareholders. If you promise to release a product that's going to be amazing, incredible, and revolutionary by April, and you do not, things get hard. So actually, if you compare Netscape, they I believe Netscape 4, they promised to have this desktop integration, was awesome, but it never materialized. And they kept promising stuff and they were not delivering, right? And they had a Netscape 3, I believe 2 or 3 was a really good product.
Yeah, I remember that one.
While Internet Explorer 3 sucked badly, Internet Explorer 4 was okay-ish, was a little more stable. And then, of course, there's Internet Explorer 6. That's the best browser ever. It's impossible to kill. It's like cockroaches. We are going to have the nuclear winter, and there's going to be Internet Explorer 6 somewhere running because it's insane.
That's funny. Yeah, those browser wars were a terrible time. And it's funny to think that Microsoft now has just completely changed so much more for the better. Starting probably, well, actually, since what's his name? Is it Palmer?
Steve Ballmer.
Balmer, right? Yes. Bye bye. Yeah, it's so much nicer. All the great things that Microsoft has done, well, including, well, maybe a little scary, that purchase of GitHub. What
about purchasing Guido? Guido
Yes.
Awesome now works for Microsoft, my friend.
This is totally new news off the press. Yeah, this is just a couple of days ago, right?
Exactly. And of course, when I joke purchasing, because in the end it's like that. He was HR, and then from Microsoft arrived with like a truck full of money and say, okay, what else do you want? Do you want an island? You have an island. What else do you want?
Yeah, so now Microsoft is the home of the inventor of Python, which is a pretty good coup.
It is. And actually, they bought a company I loved a few years ago. They when I start, I transition away from Plone and I start building like startups, because at some point I was helping Rocket Internet to build startups one after the other. We had this solution that was built on top of Docker and later on top of Kubernetes. And that the name escapes me now, but yeah, whatever. It was really good. I gave a talk about that in one of the Plone conference. It was really good. It was like a Heroku, an open source Heroku running on top of Kubernetes later on. And the interesting thing that happened was the fact that Microsoft went there and bought the company, mostly because they wanted to buy like 3 or 4 people from the team. They were really, really brilliant. Like the creator, I believe it's Gabe Monroe, great solution. And now these are the guys running Azure. So it's Microsoft is doing a lot of good things. And I'm happy for one side because we have an option besides Amazon and Google, because that scares me a lot when everything we do, we use Google. But at the same point, it's strange. It reminds me a point in history of Plone when all of a sudden the great guys in the Plone community were hired by Firefox, by Mozilla.
Right. Yeah.
They started basically removing everyone from the community. It's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, and that's right. There was a period of time when, one after the other, a whole bunch of really important names in Plone had moved on. I think Leamy was working there for a while, and then he moved to Google for a bit.
He went first he went to Google, and then from Google he went to Mozilla.
Yeah, and this is one of the downsides for me of going home usually a day early from the sprints, because I've been there for like the training and then the talks, and then by the time the sprints roll around, my brain is just mush, and so I usually just give up on the last part of the sprint. And I remember that particular conference in San Francisco, was the sprint was held in the Mozilla building overlooking San Francisco Bay. I was like, oh, I can't believe I went home.
It was amazing. It was really amazing. I remember, and actually that conference for me was the most awesome one, because it was after Halloween's, right? So I arrived in San Francisco when people were walking the streets dressed in costumes. So all of a sudden I crossed like a bunch of people from Starfleet in San Francisco. And I'm really a big tracker. I'm kind of, oh my God, it happened. I'm here.
That's cool.
It was really cool.
Yeah, I'm just remembering the conference. Well, actually, so the other friend who's really big into Star Trek, I'm sure there are many others, but Victor Fernandez de Alba is a huge Star Trek fan. And I remember at the conference in Barcelona, he had different colored T-shirts made. So one color for the attendees, and I think a gold colored T-shirt for, command, obviously command shirt
Yeah.
for the organizers. And so I was very happy to be able to get one of those gold T-shirts.
Too bad he had not a red shirt. Would be awesome.
That's right.
I organized like the Plone Symposium 2011, Python Brazil 2011. We had the T-shirts were blue, and but the commanding was red. It was like the reverse red shirt joke.
Oh, let me see if I can. Okay, hang on. I'm just gonna step away for a moment.
And he disappears. That's like magic. Zoom backgrounds.
I know, and this background is Mount Fuji, seen from the space station. All right, so hopefully you can see this.
Oh, I love this book.
Red shirts.
If you have not read this book, you need to stop whatever you're doing now and read this book. John Scalzi is amazing, and this book is amazing.
It's a really good idea. Yeah. So a curious side story about this. This guy, John Scalzi, is the college friend of a friend of mine here in Oshkosh, Carl Lowenstein, who's a history professor. So he's a colleague of my wife's, and Carl had gone to the University of Chicago for his undergrad degree, and this is where he met Scalzi. So Carl was the one telling me, you got to read this guy's books. And I think the other novel he's really famous for is Old Man's War.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also a really good one. It's interesting how Plone gets full circle in this, right? Because I remember once I was in Cordoba with Steve McMahon, and I was talking about favorite books, and my favorite book, it's one called The Years of Rice and Salt from Kingston and Robinson, the same guy that wrote the Mars trilogy and so on and so forth. And then Steve McMahon said, oh, he lives nearby my place. He lives in Davis, California. I'm kind of, what the fuck?
Small world.
Oh, yes, it is. Especially when you have Plone friends.
All right. So now I'm thinking about some of the other questions I wanted to ask you. Since we're talking about Victor, and I know this is kind of like a little contentious at the moment in the Plone community, but there is some tension about the Plone Road Map and what should be in Plone 6. And Victor, as I hope everybody who's watching this knows, is the principal developer for Volto, which for a couple of years now, or a year and a half, or maybe longer, has been in the Plone Road Map to be the default front end for Plone 6. And I remember at the time, some of the discussion that went into developing that roadmap was that we were going to have, usually for major version number increases for a piece of software, you typically want to have some new functionality, significant new functionality for the users and significant new functionality for backend. And so I think the understanding was that the Volto front end would be that new user-facing feature that would be significant enough to bump the version number from Plone 5 to Plone 6. So if I know this is still under a lot of discussion, how do you feel about the direction of Plone for the usability, from the usability perspective, the future of Plone or the continuing use of Plone? Is there a reason why it would be good not to have Volto as the default front end for Plone?
So I've been vocal about a headless Plone for quite a while now. I've been using headless Plone since 2015, right? When I moved to my first startup here in Berlin, we used Plone as the CMS, headless, actually feeding into a PHP system that was the one rendering everything. And then I went to another company and also Plone as a CMS, headless, and so on. So first things first, I do believe headless is the way to go for Plone, easily. There's no question about that. And even though I do not feel comfortable myself right now writing React code and using Volto, that's mostly because of me, not because of the technology itself. I tried Volto as a user and it's good enough. It's really good. And I do believe most of the relevant development we had in Plone over the last 1.5 years after the Python 3 marathon led by Philip is related to Volto, right? That being said, for me, Volto, Plone 6 should be Volto. That's quite simple. We should have like, you're starting a new Plone site, this is the way to go. We should have a legacy and some sort of legacy. But then it comes to a problem we have, in my point of view, again, and I verbalized that for some close friends in the past. That's the fact that we lack a clear cut of what is user interface for Plone right now. Because everything depends on CMF Plone, and CMF Plone, there's a mix of like the core function, core features, and also some things that are clearly UI related. So if I had a voice and I am considering writing a blip about this, is to define what Plone Core is. And Plone Core should be a set of API, not necessarily REST APIs, but a set of APIs that you could use to build your solution on top of it. Mm-hmm. And then Volto would plug with REST API in there, and we have a complete solution here. And then someone wants to maintain the Barceloneta and a server side would have a different set of things on top of this. Because in the end, what do we have with with Volto? It's not only a new front end, it's a different way of thinking the user interface, right? Volto kind of boxes the concept of mosaic in there. Volto kills the concept of viewlets and portlets.
Right.
Right. And even though I love Martin Aspelli and I'm grateful for everything he did, portlet was a really bad idea. It solves a lot of problems, but it's over-engineered to a level that's insane. Right. That being said, I would love to see something like Plone Core, and on top of Plone Core, we would have different front ends. One front end could be the old Castle CMS, or I could build something else. This would also allow local communities develop their own Plone powered solutions. Right now in Brazil, I would say most of the Brazilian government still runs Plone, even though the Plone community in there it's mostly hidden. They use a packaging of Plone called Plone Portal Padrão. That's actually a policy package with some add-ons that creates a Plone with the look and feel for the Brazilian government, right? And I created that back in 2012. And I remember how painful it was and how much I needed to hammer things in Plone or actually monkey patch things in Plone to get this done. Because I want to have a different add new Plone site, right? View. And to do that, you need to basically patch things, you need to add the overrides and so on and so forth. It's not like pluggable. And oh, I do not want to load this bunch of stuff, or I need to remove the content creation. It was not something easy. It's doable. We did. I probably can do that again now in a matter of 1 hour because I know what's involved. But anybody else that comes and, oh, I want to do something like that, it's painful. So I would love to see a situation, a future where Plone is a clear API for content management. And then we have different user interfaces or different user experience based on what your customer needs. Imagine having a Plone distribution focusing on NGOs, one focusing on universities, and so on and so forth.
Yes, the dream of Plone EDU and Plone Gov. Yes, those are initiatives that were for a while quite active. And I remember talking to Steve McMahon about modifying the unified installer to make distribution of Plone for EDU, and then we would have done the same thing for Gov. I remember thinking, though, at the time, for the use cases I saw as part of Plone EDU, was that there were no features that universities, for example, needed in Plone that were not in general Plone. And it wasn't important enough to try to remove features that were in general Plone for EDU users. In fact, mostly Plone EDU became a set of essentially Plone with a bunch of add-ons that were used at every department, every college, every university institution that I was aware of. So it seemed in the end that the kind of sophistication you're talking about in making an API that you could add to wasn't something that I saw for EDU being particularly needed. But I remember, so one of the things I should make sure people who are watching this know is that it seemed, is it still the entire federal government of Brazil uses Plone in this form?
The main portals, yes. And if you pay attention to community.plone.org, there's a user there called IDG Serpro. That's actually a collective of people. Serpro is basically a state-run IT company that developed most of the government sites. And at some point, probably they were the biggest Plone shop in the world by a factor like of 10 easily.
Wow.
They had more Plone developers than anybody else in the world.
So I'm glad you said this, because for the longest time I'd see this person posting and I go, who is this person?
I have no idea who's behind that account, but they have like a development center that focuses on Plone, and they have really good developers there, and they've been doing Plone since 2002 or 3 in different forms and so on and so forth. So I would tell you that what was, and actually, and this is not the biggest in number of sites is not the biggest case in Brazil. The biggest case is something called Portal Modelo. It's like standard portal developed to legislative chambers. And it was developed by initially by the late Jean Ferri, and now it's maintained by Rafaela Banzanella. And this is used by around 3,000 cities in Brazil. It's like sites that have all the laws and who's the city councilor. And if you want to complain about something, you have there a form to complain and so on and so forth. And they start doing that, especially for smaller cities, the cities without an IT budget. Some cases, cities without even a city hall building because they're really small and poor. And at some point, we had big cities in Brazil doing that because it was a really good solution. It was for free, and they got even a warranty of like this company connected to the Brazilian Senate. So Ramiro is a guy that works with that from time to time, so he can tell you more. But the whole point is Plone in the Brazilian government, it's something like, it's insane. It's still big, even though there are not that many companies anymore in Brazil. The community is kind of on a low profile mode, but they're still there.
Yeah, I remember this when I was on the board with you. This was one of our challenges, which is to maintain a connection to the Brazilian Plone community, and I understand the language barrier is a difficult one to overcome. And as I keep saying, whenever I've been blessed to be able to work with so many people around the world who do Plone, and I feel blessed that even though I do speak French and maybe a little bit of Spanish, it's amazing to me how many people are so kind and speak English. I mean, I guess in a way it is the language of the shared language for software development for so many, but it's such a shame that we can't overcome this one difficulty with the Brazilian Plone community, and especially given the spectacular success that they've had in Brazil.
But then it really comes to community leadership, right? And we have in the Brazilian Plone community, up to this day, we have amazing people, but they are the type of people that do not want the spotlight. They prefer to help others to achieve stuff and so on. And for quite a long time, I used to joke that I was the buffon, the joker in the community, because I would say, okay, you need someone to basically go there and say something. I go there and say something because people are like shy or something. To the point that the Plone Conference 2013, when we presented the conference 2012, I went on stage and talked, even though I was not planning to be involved. I was like, okay, I can help, but really, I do not want to invest too much time in this because I had organized a conference a year before, and it is fun, but it is stressful for quite a long period of time, and I wanted to enjoy the conference more than keep worrying about the conference itself. So that being said, I went there on stage and made the presentation and so on. But the real leaders of that conference were Tanya, Rafaela, Cynthia Cinquini, and Jean Ferri. These were the people basically. Oh, and Giuseppe Romagnoli, that's a Plone Foundation member for sure. These were the people actually making things happen. But you are never going to see Giuseppe giving a talk about Plone or Rafaela giving a talk. She does things, but she's not the person that goes on stage and talks and takes the spotlight. So we lack sometimes someone to do this.
When I think of the others who have helped organize all these events, the sprints, the conferences, the symposia, that just even the ones that I've been aware of, it's been very much like that people in Plone are often, well, very introverted, because a lot of very good developers, probably most good developers, are introverts. And so they don't also like to take credit for things. I think a lot of us share the idea that we want to help and we want to make things better for other people. And this is probably my first introduction to the Plone community, was how helpful everybody was and still is, and yet shy of, as you said, taking the spotlight. It's often like, I'll do the work, but you go talk.
Exactly. We first of all, I was excited to bring the Plone community to Brazil, right? Mostly because the Brazilian community had this vision of how everyone else in the community was. I remember my first Plone conference was in Bristol, 2010, and I went there with Dornelis, the late Dornelis Tremea, and he took me by the hand and introduced me to all these famous names I saw. Imagine he came to introduce me to Hano, and oh, nice to meet you, Americo. And Hano said, man, I saw your name popping up everywhere, and I was like, oh my god, he knows my name, he knows my name. Yeah. And I remember talking to Martin Espelli the first time, and it was like mesmerizing, right? I knew already Limi and Alan from different conference before, but knowing all these other guys and girls, meeting Elizabeth Letty was kind of mind-blowing, right? And this is the kind of thing that I wanted the rest of the Brazilian Plone community to like to experience and to feel, and to kind of make them see, okay, these people, all of them are like human beings. They are like you. Most of them are shy. Like I remember the first time I met Andreas Young, and of course, as everybody else in the community, at some point, Andreas Young yelled at me for some reason on Twitter or on GitHub, whatever, on IRC. And I met him, and he was lovely, and we start talking, and I'm kind of, oh my God.
Yes.
It's like, it's good to see people.
Yeah, the nicest guy in person, but yeah, you want to strangle him online. I remember.
There are many of us like that.
Yes. We've all had our little run-ins with Andreas. But yeah, I remember taking Nathan Van Geen with me to the Plone Symposium at Penn State. It must have been 2009, maybe, probably. And sitting walking around in the conference room, and there were these round tables that were laid out. And I think Martin Espelli was there, and I just said, "Oh, Nathan, this is Martin." Introduced them, and he was like, but yeah, these people are just wonderful. They're just so down to earth. And a similar thing happened to me at the 2008 conference in DC, when I just happened to sit down at dinner, and people went around the table to introduce themselves, and one after another, it was like, this person I knew fortunately from Penn State, but at the end of the table, it was like, "Oh, I'm Steve McMahon." And I go, "Oh my God, you're." He was like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Steve, man, I love Steve. He was one of the nicest persons I ever met in a community, open source community, ever. And he's brilliant.
Yeah, I know, good. Just the quiet, amazing competence, and yet so down to earth, and so good. You mentioned the Plone core being an API. And I remember at the strategic discussion we had in Bristol in 2014, I remember that was one of the solutions that I think the whole community came to. Martin Aspelli was I guess, the facilitator for that pretty big discussion. The room was packed. It was amazing that so many people showed up for this thing, and I guess we all felt like this was the future of Plone that we were deciding. And the decision at that particular meeting was that we would develop an API that would be that interface layer between the back end of Plone and the front end of Plone. And I'm trying to remember now, I think that development had been underway for a couple of years at least. But that was sort of the Plone core API, wasn't it? I mean, is that what you're still thinking of?
Yes, that was the main idea. I am going to give you an example right now. At this moment, if you want to create a user, you have 3 different codes that should do exactly the same thing. If you decide to create a user and your Plone site has the setting of using UUID to like the as user ID, the code to implement that is not available on Plone API, meaning you cannot create a user using UUID via Plone API, right? But you can do that if you use the login form or if you use Plone REST API.
Okay.
So I'm building Pendect, my company now. So I'm kind of, okay, I'm a smart guy. I really don't want to use the user folder in the long run, but in the beginning, let's go with that. So I want to use UID for the user IDs, right? And then I start creating with Plone API, and it works. I get the UID is the same username. And the problem with that is the fact that if people change usernames, I end up with content that's orphaned everywhere in the site, and that's a bad idea, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So, and then I start digging and I find out REST API re-implemented the thing that the form did, but nobody cared to go back to Plone API. So I would say we should, as a community, put an effort to get Plone API and kind of stretch it to cover all the Plone development. There's a clip from Philip that I was like vocal to support him, and then completely forgot about that, about the relations being added to Plone API. There's a clip there. I'm going to take some time. At Pendect, one of the things I'm doing is I really want to minimize the contacts I have with the whole Plone stack. Because if I want to onboard someone new, someone that's not Plone aware, it's going to be close to impossible to tell the person like, oh, if you want to do a redirect, you need first to get the utility in here and then do this and then do that. So I created a facade for the Plone API. So I have pendect.portal.api. That's a facade for Plone.api that already has the fix for the OID. So when you do Plone api.user.create, it already goes and fix the UID. That's basically changing the username. I have something called change username. So api.user.change username, because it's something that happens. api.user change password, also something that happens. And I know that most of the things I've done solve my own problem, but they're going to be hard to implement because we have pause and many possible use cases and so on and so forth. But in any case, it's a way to make the introduction to Plone easier. And also, we keep talking about, for instance, Voto and REST API. That's amazing, but there's also a bunch of us that still need to develop content types that still need to develop content rules and stuff like that. And the development story for those things did not evolve a single bit since 2014.
Okay.
And
So there's
also,
still. Go ahead.
and also, I remember as a community we decided not to use Plone API in Plone Core. So REST API uses Plone API only for the tests because there's this law of to avoid circular imports and so on and so forth. But in the end, what happens is they re-implement a bunch of stuff that should actually be moved one layer down. What I would love to see is basically the Plone.api being wider and covering more cases. Stuff like, Plone API.ui. That's things related to viewlets, portlets, blocks, and whatever. And Plone API.generic setup that masks the run all imports from blah, blah, blah. Simple stuff like that. And reduce the amount of get utility, query utilities that we need to know by heart. Also because I would say that right now, the weakest point of Plone 5.2 by far is documentation. Because we had okay documentation for Plone 5.1, and then from 5.1 to 5.2 should be kind of equal, except that we moved from ZOP 2 to ZOP 4. And things changed. And we did not went back to the documentation and said, okay, this cron server does not exist anymore. Or this in here does not exist anymore. This won't work. So we are missing this. Like we have a bunch of historical solutions that sometimes they work, sometimes they do not because it's new version of ZOP and blah, 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 that we should put some time to kind of simplify to help new people to come on board if they want to develop something for Plone. Not only user interfaces.
That definitely was part of the rationale for going to a Plone API, which was to make it simple for a developer to read. This is the one way you do this thing. Because I remember that was one of the talks that Martin gave probably in DC, and it's certainly one that Paul Everett gave at the Plone Symposium at Penn State, probably 2010. It was simplifying, I think that was Martin Aspelli's title. It was like taking a chainsaw to Plone development or something, to like instead of 3 ways of doing the same thing, like obviously we should just have the one, and the Plone API would make it explicit and very simple to look up.
So 2008, right? And we are 2020.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, going from Plone 3 to Plone 4, there was a big simplification, a big reduction in the Plone source code size. I'm not sure where we stand, but I remember at the time Plone had 1.3 million lines of code and was shrunk down to 1 million lines of code or something like that. So it is really not surprising that developers have a tough time mastering Plone at that level of detail, but that is the goal of the API, to make it so you just need to pay attention to this one layer.
And actually, if there's any new Plone developer watching this, I would say the following. If you want to know how to do something, look at the user interface and try to find out how the user interface does that, right? Because my way of thinking about is, okay, the user interface is in, how do I log out a user? I have no idea, but there's a logout page, right? So let's see how does that implement that, and then you keep going down and so on. It's painful. We should have a simple API. We don't, but it's there.
So what I'm hearing is that you're going to give a talk at the upcoming conference, right? The 2020 Plone conference. you should at least whatever you've already proposed you're going to give. It sounds like you should give a talk on completing the work of the Plone API, right? And so that's the very first thing I imagine that you're going to be called upon. You're being voluntold, Érico.
Exactly. Actually, I gave the Plone conference talk. I gave a slight modified version of it a week ago at the Python Brazil conference. And I mentioned, like, okay, I'm talking to Python developers, right? Not Plone developers, even though I knew for a fact that some Plone developers were there watching. But I was trying to tell Python developers, okay, how it is to, and most of them are younger. Some of them are younger than Plone, right? And
Oh,
that's a
wow.
fact. And most of them are younger than Zope, for sure. And I was there talking, okay, how do you write Python 3 code for in a code base that's mostly legacy Python 2 and so on, of course, running Python 3, but, and how do you use these new cool features of the language, and how do you deal with the complexity of 20 years of 20 more years of experience there, right? And the approach I had at Pendect is a company with one developer myself, right? So I know for a fact that I have a pretty good memory, but from time to time I forget what I've done. I know that I've done something somewhere, but I do not know if it was in this project or 20 years ago. So yeah. So in there, I created this facade. And I mentioned that creating a facade to the Plone API and to the Plone solution it was a way for me to kind of get productive and write code that's mostly Python 3. And it has type hints almost everywhere. Because this is something that for quite a long time I was against in the Python community, basically to put Python language to push for typing. But now I see the value, right? And not and I can write code that does not require typing, and that's perfect. And if my typing hints are wrong, nothing's going to break. I'm not using MyPy right now, so it's okay-ish. I know in our case, we would have, like in the Plone community, we are going to have some interesting challenge because find me content, and the content could be a document, a folder, and so on and so forth, but probably is a dexterity. So we are going to lose some of the nuances of some of the benefits of typing in, but it's a way to go because the rest of the Python developers everywhere is using that. I've been playing with Fast API these days, and I'm in love with how simple it is to implement a API, a synchronous API with the Open API specification, basically writing Python code. No need to touch JSON files, no need to touch YAML files. You write Python code, add a bit of type hints, and it's done. And I do believe Plone needs to start moving that way. If we don't, no one is going to die. Our code bases are still going to run. Companies are going to make money out of Plone. And this is something I'm going to quote Juan Pablo Jimenez from Rosario. At some point I was discussing with him like, oh, Plone could die at some point. And he said, yeah, Plone is not going to die anytime soon. Some of us will probably retire doing Plone. And because there's always going to be legacy systems, there's always going to be use cases and so on. But we are going to be more and more niche. And people would, and this is a risk. This is something we need to face in the community, that over the years, we had this growing divide in the community because the way 6 Feet Up sells Plone is different the way my old company used to sell Plone. And that was different from the way Red Turtle sells Plone. And different from Abstract and different from all the other companies. So every time we got together to do marketing for Plone, was a mess because, we need to create material to fight against Drupal. I don't care about Drupal, man. Drupal is really small in Brazil. Drupal is not a competition. On the other hand, in Brazil, LiveRay is a competition. Oh, I never heard about LiveRay. And it was always like that. And it got even worse when you think about Dylan J use case of Plone is basically fighting against WordPress, right?
Yep.
And there are other companies that go with, like Syslab, with internet solutions, really powerful ones. We have a product, Plone, that kind of does everything.
It's been. Go ahead.
What I was going to say is basically, some of these companies and some of these people will still be doing Plone in 20 years. Either we have an API or go with Voto or do not go with Voto, whatever, right? And if we as a community kind of fell prey to this kind of, but my customers need this, there's always a customer of someone willing to keep the old thing running, right? We are not going to move. We are not going to improve. So we need to kind of push in the right direction.
So do you want to tell me a little bit more about, tell me more about the origin of Pendect, why, and what does it do?
So first things first, Pendect, it's the original idea of Christoph Young, one of my partners, like one of my co-founders, and the other one is Ashley, the one that wrote this card about YouTube. Christoph had this idea that most of the time we are consuming news like never before. There's information everywhere, but most of the information is based on opinions. So you get someone's opinion and then you write your opinion on top of that opinion and so on and so forth. And we needed to get back to facts. We wanted to give people like the simplest form of news, factual, and pointing back to the source. Because again, every time you write about something, you're putting your own bias, your own prejudice, if you have one. But we wanted to give people like a way of, okay, this is where they came from, so I can read and opinionate myself. Also, the best possible description is this needs to be really short news, like short pills. We call these concept cards. There's a categorization. It's something we discussed in the beginning that was important for us. This is something we are going to review pretty soon, if it's important or not, if I can have many different categories and so on. Title, body, and if you go down, you're going to see content sources, different sources, where the image came from, who wrote the card, and location and places, organizations, and who's involved in this. Every time you click in one of those, you move to a page with other stuff related to this. Okay? You see, now getting a little bit technical, you see there's a traversal there. People, Soichi Nobushi, right? Basically in here, it's for every, we have 4 different types of categorization. We have the usual tags, the subject of Plone. We have location, organization, and people. So each one of these other 3 is categorized with their own traversal there, and it's a way to connect things. Most of these, for instance, the International Space Station is a tag, you see, and this information mostly comes from DBpedia. That's an open source effort led by the Leipzig University and other places. But these guys, they provide you with a data set from Wikipedia and a server solution that you feed a text there, and it already detects, okay, you're talking about NASA, you're talking about Victor Glover and Soichi Noguchi and so on and so forth. So we wanted to be able to create this mesh of metadata, allowing people to kind of navigate through the concepts and get more information. I want to know more about SpaceX, whatever you publish. And there's a list of things and so on. SpaceX is an organization. We have in the backend, but we are not displaying here because of the need to editorialize a bit. It's the fact that SpaceX, this is the same identifier we have on the Wikipedia, and we also have the Wikipedia description. We implemented that using Super. That's this solution for lightweight objects in ZODB. So the same way we implemented things like I want to follow a category, I want to follow a contributor. If you click on my name there, or I'm going to have my own page. I wrote like 635 cards. I have followers and so on and so forth. I follow other people. I have in here, you see Jack of all trades, sub-contributor. These are actually tags like the old badges, but this, different from the badges, I went for a low-code solution using groups. So basically, I put myself in some groups. And to do that, I have a cron job that daily runs and check, oh, how many cards this person written? Oh, 600. Is it changing the groups from before? No. So no change. Otherwise, we send an email saying, oh, congratulations, you acquire a new badge and so on and so forth. And to incentivize people to write, now we have the policy of for every new card, we plant one tree.
Aha, nice.
It's the idea we got inspired from Ecosia, the open source search engine, the search engine that plants a tree every time you use them instead of Google. So it's kind of the thing. All you see here is Plone, but in the backend, and it's Plone with modified Barceloneta. We are moving to a headless Plone with a React frontend, not necessarily Volto, because Volto solves a lot of problems that we do not have in here. We do not do, actually, our users mostly, they do not do high-level content management. They submit something and eventually they go there and edit and so on. So no need to have the full-blown Volto solution. But then the idea is to move to a React frontend soon. And also there's one thing we developed that I'm going to talk more about in my talk at the Plone conference. One of the things we missed in Plone with the move to Python 3 is the fact that the old asynchronous solutions do not work anymore. Because we had Plone.async or collective, and anything with async, it's a big no-no in Python 3, right? So instead of trying to build something on top of Plone, I'm using a simple pattern of there are events in Plone that send a API call to some external service. This service does the heavy lifting, something like puts on a salary queue or sends or starts doing something and so on and so forth. For instance, one of the things we implemented first as a content rule and later as this external service is integration with archive.org, because we want every card in here to be archived if the domain goes down at some point and so on. Everything we have written will be there. And archive.org, it takes around 45 to 60 seconds to answer.
Mm.
So it's basically, I send from Plone right now, I send a API request to a new service. This new service queues the message like, okay, talk to archive.org and free Plone to do whatever it needs to be done after.
That's a pretty cool adaptation to manage the not hanging waiting for a response like that.
Right now we use we do have some synchronous code that talks to EFTTT and with Zapier, and it is a problem. Actually, we had this problem before of a race condition when, oh, every time you publish a new card, go to EFTTT and then tweet about it. It happened more than once that going to EFTTT talking to Twitter or Facebook was faster than Plone finishing the transaction. So we would end up with a wrong metadata being returned to Twitter and Facebook. And then we had to change that as well.
It's amazing. I mean, all these little things that you're discovering just as a result of trying to implement this.
Exactly. And if you think about it, it's like it's a big project. I'm proud of it. And we have some really decent numbers. We had one day, actually, we survived Reddit at least a dozen times already. One of them was quite impressive because we published one card submitted by this Brazilian guy, and the card was about Jair Bolsonaro being accused at Hague of crimes against humanity. And someone posted this card to Reddit. But someone posted this around 1 a.m. Berlin time, right? So I wake up in the following day and I basically here, looking around, everything's fine, looking at the alerts, nothing happened as always. Plone is pretty stable, right? And then I find out that we had 100,000 users coming to the site in like 8 hours. And Plone was basically there like, okay, come on, what's happening? Everything's fine. Of course, we have Cloudflare. Of course, we have Varnish in front of it. But Plone is really, 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 really reliable in these scenarios of high volume of access.
That's great.
I was happy.
So I want to basically close by talking about the conference. And so are you officially helping to organize this conference now?
Actually, I'm helping to organize the conference, and there's a small group of people, mostly everyone in the board, and the nice people at the Swarm, the Loud Swarm in the 6 Feet Up that are doing this. So I would say that the main organizer is probably Chrissy, because she's doing the biggest part of the heavy lifting. But I'm helping as much as I can.
Right. So that would be Chrissy Wainwright, who also happens to be the Plone Foundation president and my
Yeah.
colleague. That's pretty cool. Oh, and by the way, she showed me a video the other day of doing one arm pull-ups. I don't know if you've seen this.
Oh, I do. I do see. I follow her on Instagram, and yeah, it's really inspiring and depressing at the same time.
There's
I cannot do with two arms and two legs what she can do with one arm.
there's a whole inside story at 6 Feet Up about a challenge that took place about a year ago, and we won't go into too much detail, but let's just say Chrissy was able to beat the challenger with the number of pull-ups she was able to do. I think it was in 1 minute or something. So this is going to be a first for Plone, that the conference this year, which would have been held in Namur in Belgium, is going to be entirely online because of COVID, and we're going to be having it next month very soon, and it's going to be online, and it's going to be hosted on a virtual event platform, which is Loudswarm, which was built by 6 Feet Up, and it's going to be hopefully as close as possible to a recreation of what it would feel like to be at an in-person event. And by gosh, we're gonna try our best to make it that way. As anybody who's been at a Plone conference or a Plone sprint or a Plone symposium, or any of you listening have learned, the Plone conferences are the thing that keep the Plone community together. And I believe that Plone might have been among the first to do sprints, in-person sprints, and that's been something that's a meme that's caught on, not just in the Python community, but elsewhere. And so these in-person events are the basis for the, I guess you could say, the longevity of the Plone project and Plone community. And so we're going to try our darndest to make it as close as possible to that kind of experience, even though we're going to be seeing each other through video like this, and we're going to be interacting with each other through Slack. But I believe there are going to be some social events and lightning talks, and there's a full schedule with speakers already lined up, published, and I hope speakers are preparing their talk.
Come on, of course.
Well,
I
you
need to
might be.
prepare. Yeah, I need to prepare my lightning talk. So I'm going to have a really nice lightning talk that's mostly about my work in marketing. It's in Plone marketing because I'm part of the marketing team that's led by Hikupeka. That's amazing to work with him. And I have this crazy idea for next year. Let's see. Stay
Okay.
tuned.
All right. Well, Érico, thank you very much for spending all this time with me today on a Saturday, your Saturday evening. And I don't know, it's been my privilege to get to know you and to work with you, and I appreciate very much the calm wisdom that you bring to interactions that sometimes I'm less calm at. Uh, it's wonderful to see how active you've continued to be in the Plone community, and I laugh because you say that you're, maybe not that great a developer, but that you like to take credit for things that other people do. But I've seen how you've taken charge of so many things, and you're obviously a very good Plone developer. So it's been my privilege to get to know you and to spend time with you and work with you, and I hope we're going to keep being able to do that.
I hope so. And it's always a privilege to be part of this community, be friends with you and so many amazing people. And also, just one inside information. We already have people from 22 different countries registered at the Plone conference. So if you're not registered yet, go there, register. We have prices from $25 up. We have $25 for developing countries. So if you are not in Europe and US and Japan and so on, go for the conference. It's the opportunity to see many of the people you heard about. and interact with them. So go there, be part of the bigger Plone community.
Thanks, Érico.
Thank you.